Good afternoon. North Korea has described the latest United Nations sanctions as an act of war and tantamount to a complete economic blockade. The UN Security Council imposed the US drafted measures on Friday in response to Pyongyang's ballistic missiles test. North Korea has vowed to strengthen its nuclear deterrent to frustrate America. Sophie Long sent this report from the South Korean capital, Seoul.
An act of war that violates peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. That was North Korea's reaction to the latest and toughest round of sanctions to be imposed on Pyongyang. The US drafted resolution was agreed by all members of the UN Security Council, including China, North Korea's main ally and trading partner, who called again for all parties to show restraint.
I'm grateful to my colleagues for the serious measures we have enacted on behalf of the North Korean people, and I ask you keep them in your thoughts and prayers this holiday season as we continue to fight against this, the most tragic example of evil in the modern world.
The new sanctions include a ban on the import of nearly 90% of all oil supplies to North Korea, vital to its missile and nuclear programs. They also require the repatriation of North Koreans working abroad. It's believed Pyongyang uses their earnings to help fund its weapons development. The sanctions come in response to this, the firing of Pyongyang's most powerful missile yet, one it said could reach US soil. They're intended to push Pyongyang to the negotiating table and towards a diplomatic solution. But today's response indicates Kim Jong-un has little desire to give up his nuclear ambitions. Sophie Long, BBC News, Seoul.
2 men have died after a crash on the M40 involving a number of vehicles. 4 people were injured, 1 seriously. Police and paramedics were called to the scene on the northbound stretch of the motorway in Oxfordshire just before midnight. Officers from Thames Valley Police are calling for witnesses. 2 rescuers are searching for victims of a tropical storm in the southern Philippines where more than 200 people have died in mudslides and flash floods. Thousands of people have been evacuated from their homes, as Howard Johnson, our correspondent in Manila, now explains.
High winds and heavy rain have battered Mindanao for the last 3 days as Tropical Storm Tembin made its way across the country. Rivers burst their banks, inundating towns, while a number of villages were buried under landslides. A spokesperson for the United Nations Children's Fund said conditions on the island are dire and that many are without clean water or electricity.
There were 103
houses here. When the flood happened, it swept them all away.
Flash flood happened.
The Philippines National Disaster Council is spearheading the relief effort, providing meals and shelter to thousands of people displaced by the storm.
The call for people to evacuate in good time before the storm actually didn't have an effect. The storm passed over some of the absolutely poorest areas in the whole Philippines, and people live in hard-to-reach areas.
The Philippines is hit by around 20 typhoons every year, bringing misery to some of the poorest communities in the country. Storm Tembin has now passed the Philippines and has strengthened to typhoon status. It's now over the South China Sea. It's expected to hit Vietnam in the coming days.
Howard Johnson, BBC News, Manila in the Philippines.
Plans to ditch the Army's slogan, Be the Best, have been halted by the new Defence Secretary, Gavin Williamson. £500,000 has been spent on a rebranding exercise that would have got rid of the slogan because it was deemed elitist. The Ministry of Defence said the British Army is the best of the best and that the proposals were now on hold. London Zoo has reopened today after a fire on Saturday killed several animals and some staff had to be treated for smoke inhalation. The zoo confirmed an aardvark died and 4 meerkats are presumed to have been killed. The cause of the blaze, which broke out in the animal adventure section that spread to a shop, remains unclear. Opponents of President Putin have held a series of mass rallies in cities across Russia. Alexei Navalny, who's been jailed in the past after persistent criticism of the president, told supporters he would stand against Mr. Putin. However, it's not yet certain if officials will let him run. Pilgrims have been arriving in Bethlehem ahead of a midnight mass this evening. But this year's celebrations place amid rising tensions in the region follow the US decision to recognise Jerusalem as Israel's capital earlier this month. Our Middle East correspondent Tom Bateman is in Bethlehem for us today. Always a popular event, this, Tom. But amid the security concerns, are the numbers as big as they ordinarily would be?
Well, we're here in front of the Church of the Nativity. Now, this was the spot where Christians believe that Jesus was born, and it is the focal point of the procession that has taken place this morning, including religious leaders and other pilgrims who made their way in along the route they believe Mary and Joseph came to this particular site. There has been much festivity in Manger Square, but outside of that bubble, it comes against the backdrop, of course, of 2.5 weeks of clashes between Israeli troops and Palestinians ever since Donald Trump's announcement that America officially recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And there is now a severe diplomatic standoff between the Palestinian leadership and the United States. The Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas will be here for midnight mass tonight. He has said he cannot accept a US brokered peace plan if one is announced in the new year. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has held his weekly cabinet meeting this morning, and he has said that in his view, once again, it is the Palestinians who are not prepared to solve the conflict.
Tom Bateman in Bethlehem, thank you very much. Rail passengers are being warned they could face disruption as Network Rail carries out its biggest ever Christian engineering programme. 260 projects across England, Scotland and Wales will lead to numerous station closures over the festive period. Many of Britain's mainline routes will also be shut or running reduced services over the coming days. Cricket and England are preparing for the fourth Ashes Test, which starts tomorrow in Melbourne. England, already 3-0 down in the series, will want to do everything they can to avoid the whitewash. Patrick Geary has been examining their prospects.
Melbourne is a city which reaches for the skies. There are more tall buildings here than in London or in Beijing, a reminder to England of their now impossible climb. 3-0 down, the Ashes gone, surrounded by criticism and jibes from the Aussies. Now England have to come here, and in this place it's very easy to feel lost. It's happened before. The last England Test team to come to the MCG were 3-0 down and ended up losing the series 5-0. So how are this side any different?
The morale in the group is still really high, and no one's, there's no bickering, there's no separation within the group. It's good that we've all stuck together. I wasn't here on that previous Ashes tour, but by all accounts, there was differences within the camp back then, and it definitely doesn't feel like that here. Everyone's working hard to try and win this Test match.
If there's hope, maybe it's in a damaged heel belonging to Mitchell Starc, the top wicket taker in the series. He'll miss the Test to be replaced by Jackson Bird. Some in the England camp have claimed Australia Cup aren't up to the standard of the front line. In response, Starc can't bowl actual bouncers, but here's a verbal one.
It's quite humorous, actually. They haven't taken 20 wickets yet in the series, so and we have, and then they're having to crack it out depth. So I think they've got bigger things to worry about than the depth of Australian fast bowlers. So as I said, hopefully Jacko takes Pfeiffer, and he still bowls quick enough. Pretty sure he still bowls quicker than the Pond bowlers as well. So.
Maybe, in adversity, England will find their true character, but Australia is planning to celebrate and humiliate. And around here, one thing preoccupies them more than anything. Patrick Geary, BBC News in Melbourne.
That's it. You can see all the today's stories on the BBC News channel. The next news on BBC One is at 5:30. Goodbye for now.